Did what I did this morning, but I woke up just feeling a little stiff, and you're in a hotel room and sleeping on strange pillows and beds, and I'm like, I could go for a Starbucks, and figured I could go for a second Starbucks, and then I sent my friend down and got a third Starbucks, and now I'm like, so if I talk really fast, it's not completely nerves, it's caffeine. But I do feel like the Lord gave me something to share with you. I feel like Brother Calvin Klein. Why do we always have to say Calvin Klein? Doesn't it seem like you just can't say Brother Klein? It has to be Calvin Klein. He confirmed last night. I wanted him to back off a little bit. I'm like, he's starting to step on my stuff here. Better be careful. But I feel like the Lord confirmed what he wants for us to hear today. And the title of my message is, But God is Still Good. Job 23:10 said, When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. June of 2007, as Sister Putnam said, we went to Germany on a trip with them. And while we were there, my husband was having a lot of stomach pains. He was having it before this, but I was unaware of it. He didn't tell me, and while we were there, he kept thinking, maybe, I'm eating greasy foods or something's bothering my stomach, but it was so much and so constant that Brother Putnam, when we left, said, you have to promise me. He said, as a matter of fact, as your superintendent, I am telling you that you have to go to the doctor for this, which was good because he probably would not have otherwise. And so, you know how doctor's appointments go. It was a long time before he got in. And then when he did, they decided it was just for his appendix. And so we had an outpatient surgery scheduled. And we just, I didn't even make the bed that morning. I didn't have anybody with me because it's an appendix out. My daughter had her appendix out. It's not that big of a thing. And so we were very confident of it, and they had mentioned that maybe, possibly, there was something else going on. It could be cancer. We're not alarmist. It did not concern us too much. We had faith that everything would be fine. And of course, when he came out of surgery, the doctor took me into a private room, and when he told me that they had taken the appendix out and it had been leaking seeds of cancer over his entire abdomen, I couldn't have been more shocked. I had absolutely no clue what to do with that information. It was the type of information you absolutely cannot absorb in a moment. And the Lord brought a friend just by happenstance, really. He brought her there to my side, and we began to make phone calls, and Pastor Soto and his wife came right away, and immediately we were surrounded by about 30 very close friends from our church family. But we had to wait till he came out of his, he was in surgery, and so we had to wait for the anesthesia to wear off to tell him, and I did not want to tell him this news. And so we had all these people waiting in the hallway for the doctor to come and to tell him. And it was very difficult to wait because we all knew what it was, and he was recovering and waiting for the doctor to come in. When the doctor finally did come in and tell him, Mike's first response was to look at me and to apologize that he might not be there for me for the rest of my life. And that is just such a peek into the character of the kind of man that he was. And he was not, I'm sure fear came over him and all of that, and it took a couple days for the shock to wear off and the fear to kind of calm down. But once it did, we were very confident that the Lord would heal him. And we set about to believing for that and to praying for that and to encouraging others to do that. And then the chemo began. And, the rounds of chemo take about 6 months, and you're dealing with all the symptoms of that. There's, extreme fatigue, there's nausea. One of the drugs he was on caused extreme sensitivity to his hands and the bottom of his feet so that he could barely walk. You can imagine living in Wisconsin and having aversion, your skin, to extreme cold. Our church suffered just a tad that last winter because we always had the heat cranked up to about 80, and it was hot in the church. But everybody tolerated it kindly for their pastor, of course. The terrible sores that come with chemotherapy, constant flu-like symptoms, was beginning to wear his body down. And he was getting very tired of taking the chemo. But then we took a CT scan, and it appeared that he was in remission. And all the doctors who looked at it agreed that he was. And so we made a decision to stop the therapy that he was on, the chemotherapy that he was on, and he was really wearing down from it. And they were just going to do like a much milder form in a pill. And so we made a plan to take our daughter, who was a senior, on a trip. And while we were on this trip, and I want to say it was maybe 2 weeks after he went off chemo, while we were on this trip, he suddenly had lumps in his stomach that were actually protruding. And he had not had that before, and he was, he felt like the pain was back, and my heart sank, and I can't tell you the anxiety the first time through, you're very hopeful, you're shocked, but then the second time through, it's a different feeling. You feel defeat with it right away. And my heart sank, and I was disappointed, and he was disappointed and scared, more so than the first time. And when we got back, it's almost like somebody takes a syringe and just sucks the hope right out of you when it comes back, when you thought it was gone. And I'm sure many of you heard the victory reports, and then you heard it was back, and you probably experienced something similar to the same emotion, like, what? Why? Why would this be back so quick? And it was extremely aggressive. By the time he got there, it had only been like 4 weeks that he had been off the chemo, and they were very large, and they were extremely invasive all over his abdomen, and there was no way to surgically remove them. They were just too many, growing too fast. So we needed to make a decision about chemotherapy, if he should go back on it or not. And if you've never been through an experience like this, probably the worst part is the waiting. It's constantly hurry up and wait. And I read through all my email updates I sent, and I can remember one in particular where I was sitting in a doctor's office and just waiting and waiting, and they rescheduled it, and then we went back and waited for more hours and hours of waiting, and and then you wait for the results, and so weeks go by of waiting, and it's just so frustrating because you feel like, let's do something now, not in a month, let's do it now. And that's not how it is. And so there was waiting, and during this time he was in extreme pain, and we were making emergency room runs to the hospital to try and get the pain under control. And it was proving to be so aggressive and entangling itself so much. But on one particular run that we went to the hospital, the doctor decided that he better take a look inside. There must be an obstruction on his colon. And so we scheduled a surgery the next day, and he went in, and he closed him back up, and he came out, and he said, it's too big, it's too entangled, I can't remove it, there's too many new ones growing. And at that point, he wanted Mike to decide whether he wanted to try chemo or not. I was not there for this conversation. Now, we were very blessed to have a surgeon who was a Christian man. And I'm not sure what all went on in that conversation, but Mike felt like he had a connection with this man, and he shared many things with this man about his frustrations and, of not only not being healed, but of the ministry and his children. When you're a pastor, I don't know, I'm speaking from my own experience, but I'm assuming most pastors do this. They're workaholics. They seriously are. And if you're here, love your pastor. I guarantee you he's many times putting his family on the back burner to meet your needs. And, at the end of your life, you look back sometimes and you're like, he felt like he missed so much of his children's lives, building the church and working hard as he did. And he may have missed a big part of their life. And so there's those regrets, and he shared those with his doctor. And his doctor was even the one, this surgeon, who was the one who had to say, Mike, I think you have to stop preaching. You cannot do this anymore. And my husband started to cry. And if you knew my husband, he was not an emotional. I wonder if any of you have ever seen him cry, even in worship. He's just a man's man, and he's not that sensitive to cry like that. I've seen him cry a few times, but when his doctor told him, you need to consider that it's time to stop preaching, he cried. And so it was this doctor and him who talked and decided that the best route would be not to go back on chemotherapy. So when I walked in the hospital that morning, Mike was sitting in the bed, and he had come out of surgery, and he had a smile on his face, and he looked like he was at peace. And I'm like, did you get good news, or what's going on? And he said, no, but Dr. Bruder and I came to a decision. And I said, okay, and what would that be? He said, we have decided that I'm not going to take chemotherapy again. And I was comfortable with that because I saw the peace on his face. And I knew that he had prayerfully considered it, that him and his doctor had talked about all the options and what that means. What I did not know and was not prepared for was when you decide not to take chemotherapy and they put you into hospice care, basically you're released from doctor's care. And it's like, bye, see you later. And I'm like, I have to take care of him? I have no medical training, are you serious? And so they sent me home with him, and I was truly frightened because they sent me home with like a box of medication, and you know, of course the hospice nurses come and all of that, but the care falls on the caretaker. And I did not obviously feel qualified to do this, and I was very frightened. But you know, sometimes in those situations, and moms, you know this, you just got to do what you got to do. You just get up and do it, and you don't think about it or meditate on it too much. You just get up and do it. And so his health began to steadily and quickly decline. And for that, I'm grateful that he didn't go through months and months of suffering. It was long enough. He was not eating. If he ate a small bite of something, he kept it down maybe 10 minutes. And so he was not eating at all. The fluids that he was taking in, he couldn't keep in. We had to put a drain into his stomach and drain it, because if we didn't drain it out the tube from his stomach, he would throw up, which he was constantly doing. Of course, with that, he lost large amounts of weight very quickly. His strength declined. He appeared to age 20 years in a matter of weeks. And he could barely walk. I had to lift him out of the chair, which he hated. And kind of just you have to find humor in these things. I have two big strapping sons. One is like 6'4" and the other one is about 6 foot. And they were there almost all the time to help. But sometimes I had to help him up. Well, I dropped him once, and the next time I went to pick him up, he's like, oh no, not you. I'm like, I'm the only one home, I have to. He wasn't that thrilled to have me lugging him around, but I tried my best. These weeks brought some of our most sobering moments. During these weeks, this was through the summer, he would apologize often, which broke my heart. He would apologize for what I was having to do for caring for him. He hated it that I had to care for him that way. He was so independent. When he had a cold, some men are babies when they're sick. Definitely not my husband. He was not that type of guy. If he had a cold, he just, the most I had to do for him was buy the cold tablets, honestly. That was it. And let him know where they were. That was it. He took care of himself. And so he would just constantly apologize that I had to care for him. And then he would apologize that he wasn't going to be here for me. And then he would apologize for what he missed in the kid's life. And we'd had some of the most difficult and sweetest conversations during these times. By the end of June, he made a decision that we needed to buy a cemetery plot. And it was a difficult day to do this. And his attitude was always so good, but this day, driving around looking for one, was extremely sobering. And then to go to the funeral home and make the arrangements. But you know what? We were only doing that as a backup plan. We still believed God would heal him. He really did. He felt like you prepare for the worst, you believe for the best. And that's how we lived our life. We prepared for the worst and believed for the best. Amazingly, he maintained a light schedule through July, even into August, really. He would let me take him to the office for an hour or so, and he'd sit and shift through his mail a little bit. He wanted to go with me in the car when I ran to the grocery store, just to sit in the car. He'd go to church picnics or whatever other picnics were going on that people invited us to and just sit in his chair. His strength of will was truly amazing. He had faithful friends who would visit him during this time, and no matter how ill he was, he would manage to get himself up out of bed and go, even if it was only 10 minutes, to visit with them just a little bit, to listen to them, to hear what they had to say. He's always had something positive when they left. The double blow for me came as I struggled watching my kids handle the loss of their father and trying to comfort them through it. Their hopes and dreams were obviously slowly fading in front of them. My husband was a builder since we got married when I was 18, and since the day I married him, I have never lived in a house that he did not build. And we've moved quite a few times, but he built many homes, and he wanted the first home of each of his children to be built by him. And so that was something that they had to watch fade and let go of that dream. And of course he wanted to walk, we only have one girl, and he wanted to walk her down the aisle, and he was constantly teasing them about their children. You know, I'm gonna spoil your babies, I'm taking them to Disneyland and getting them all this stuff, and I'm sending them back to you, you know. And so there were lots of conversations, as I'm sure many of you have with your children, about the future hopes that you want to do, or vacations you're going to take, or things you're going to do as you're growing older together. And for my kids to see that go and let that die, I was dealing with my own grief, trying to help them, was a double blow. On September 5th, 2008, just 1 year and 1 month after finding out he had cancer, he passed away. Now, it's common in times of great sorrow and disappointment or unwanted change that we ask the question, why? I don't know if it's just human nature, but we want to apply a reason to everything that happens to us, don't we? And so, you know, it's easy for us to become consumed with, why did this happen to me? And the truth is, this is going to be really unsatisfying. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer for you, but it is the truth. Sometimes it rains on the righteous and the unrighteous alike, and it's not anything you did. It's just life. For myself, I did not question why cancer came to our door. I didn't feel entitled to escape life's tragedies. Everybody in this room has bad stuff happen in their life. Every one of you. Your children get sick, a parent gets Alzheimer's, your husband loses his job, somebody has a debilitating disorder, something in your life happens. Who are we to think that we would escape that? And I don't feel entitled, like, because I serve God, nothing bad will happen to me. I never felt that way. And so when cancer came, I was disappointed, of course, and hurt, and I had to learn how to struggle through that. But I didn't feel like, why? Why would God do this to me? My why came in the suffering. I had a very hard time reconciling what I knew of God, who is kind and gentle and loving, right? And then watching my husband suffer to such a great degree. I could not bring those two home together. There was no answer in my mind why that would be allowed. I mean, why not let him go quickly? Why weeks and weeks and weeks of pain and this slow starvation? And the answers started driving me crazy. And I would like to share with you my conclusions. I passed it by my pastor, Pastor Soto. He said it's A-okay. So this is what I came to. I do believe, and I know each of you believe, that everything that happens to us passes through the hands of God, right? Is that true as Christians? Yes. All right. Now that puts us in a quandary, doesn't it? Because sometimes we're like, well, I don't really particularly care for what I'm going through right now. You're telling me God let this happen to me? I think I'm mad at him. Why would he let this happen to me? Haven't we thought that? And so that puts us in a little bit of a quandary. But here's the question that has to come to mind then. Do you believe God is a loving father or a cruel father? Do you believe that he's patient or is he intolerant? Do you see God as understanding or is he harsh? Do you think he's caring or he's distant and just doesn't really care about your life? How you view the character of God is going to very largely determine how you handle these why questions. How you view his character. When there are no answers, it is then that you have to be very cautious, because the danger comes in that you can become a prisoner of your thoughts. And I'll tell you what, when your thoughts start down this road, you can bet that the enemy is right there. Now, he cannot read your thoughts, but he can observe your actions. And when he sees you starting to get stressed and walking around angry, and when you start speaking these things, the devil's no dummy. Don't even for a second think he's stupid. He sees that and he will capitalize on that and he will attack us. You can actually talk yourself into believing that God doesn't love you or care for you. Be very careful of this. We can be brave enough to deal with the fact that some of our questions will not have answers. As unsatisfying as that is, here's something I know. This is a truth. Life is full of constantly changing circumstances and questions with no answers. I wish it were not so, but it is. And, you know, Brother Soto has used this before. I like it. Here's a good question. Number one, why is a driveway something you park on and a parkway something you drive on? Why do they call them fasts when they go so slow? Or of course, why are my children not living for God when I pray so hard for their salvation and I raise them to love God? Why are we struggling so hard financially when we have tried so hard to be faithful? When we've been good stewards of our money and been faithful to church? These questions sometimes can have no answers. Here's some suggestions. If you have paper and a pen, I'd like you to write them down. There's 5 of them, 6 of them. This is what I have come to and learned in dealing with questions that have no answers. Number 1, you ready for this? You're not going to like it. When I read this to my son, he's like, I don't like that first one. I don't like that at all. Here's the first one. You have to let go of the questions. You have to release your right to know the answer. What did God say to Job? Where were you when I created the earth? Where were you when I drew where the ocean stops and the earth begins? Were you there? What right do you have to even question me? And, you know, that doesn't take away the fact that we're human. And I do believe the Lord understands our humanity. He doesn't fault us for being human. He made us this way. However, there's got to come a point where you say, you know what? I'm just going to release my right to know. I'm releasing it. It's actually a conscious decision you make. You have to decide to do this. You know what else? This is true trust. There were times when my husband was in so much pain, literally wreathing on the floor. I couldn't take it. It was more than I could bear. And it was like watching somebody you love be tortured and somebody's holding you back from helping them. I literally felt like that. I felt like I was going crazy watching him go through this. And I would call Brother Soto and I'd be sobbing on the phone and, I don't know what to, I can't take this anymore. I can't watch this. And he said, this is what trust is. When you don't know the answer, this is what true trust is. Trust is not when you know the answer and then you say, okay, I trust you can do that. Real trust is when you have no clue what the answer is and you still say, you know what, God, I trust you to give me strength and to get through this. Shortly after my husband died, I got a call from a national leader, a very respected man of God, and he gave me some instructions that really helped me. He said, Sister Penny, there is no good answer for why God took Mike Schmalz. And if you dwell on that, you could lose your faith. And that really helped me to hear him say that. Just to know that sometimes there's not a really good answer. And you know what? In the future, we might see it. We might look back, I might look back in 10 years and say, oh, right now, any answer anybody could give me, I might get upset over. Because people have, and I'm just being really, really honest with you. People have said, oh, but so many people are coming to the Lord over this. I still want him back. That doesn't make me feel any better at all. It really doesn't. I'm just being really honest. I would rather have him here. And maybe that's selfish of me, and maybe the 20 people who come to God because of it, praise God over it. I still would rather have him here because he's my husband and this is my life, of course. And I can be generous, but not that generous. And I think the Lord's tolerant to that. But I would say that I still trust God. I don't get it, but I still trust God. I'm thankful that good things are coming from it. That doesn't really take away the pain of what happened. It really doesn't, but I'm thankful for it. However, the Bible doesn't say anywhere either that God would answer all of our questions. It does say that his grace is sufficient for us. So number one, let go of your questions. Release your right for an answer. Number two, accept our situation. We have to accept our situation. This is tough. To just step back and say, it is what it is. This is where I am. Now what am I going to do? You have to look for the good that is left in your life. You will not see good right away. I don't care if it's that. Now, our economy, I'm sure many of you are right smack in the middle of this. You lost your job. Now you have to look at, what am I going to do? You can grieve the loss of your job for a while. You can be upset about whatever came your way. But at some point, you have to accept your situation and say, now what am I going to do? Look for the good that is left. You're not going to see it right away. But in time, food will regain its taste. Flowers will begin to have a beautiful scent again. And the color in the world will change back from black and white to color. Number three, in time, we must relinquish the past. After we accept our situation, then we have to relinquish the past. Here's what I mean by this. There are things that everybody could have done different. I've spent several evenings saying, if we had just went in sooner, maybe we should have tried natural therapy, or maybe we should have done chemo the second time, or if we only hadn't taken him off of chemo, why did we do that? And I can just, and as women, I'm sure you've done that a million times over decisions. I began to, re-examine every decision we made and wonder what we could have done different, and maybe if we had done this different or done that different. And I know all of you have heard the preaching of, and I had people ask me, are you sure that there's no sin in your lives? Are you sure you've repented of everything? Are you sure that you've done this and done that? And did you put this prayer cloth under your pillow? And did you try, here's a list of prayers to quote each day. And I figured it can't hurt, I'll do it all, and I did. I tried it all. No harm done in it, and I tried all of it. We were desperate, and we quoted our scriptures every day, and we said our prayers every day, and, and put all this stuff under him. And, and I went to the point, I read one where, look in your ancestors and see if there's some sin that's dragging behind you, and I'm looking through and I'm like, pretty sure this isn't part of it. But tried it anyways, wasn't gonna miss anything there. And if you're ever in that situation, you find yourself doing some pretty bizarre things. And after a while, and I kept telling my husband, I had one point in relinquishing the past, I'm talking about, I had one point where I asked him, I'm like, what if, because I'm desperate for a healing, and I said, what if my faith's not strong enough? What if you're not going to get healed because I don't have strong enough faith? And he's like, Penny, do you really think that God's healing power is dependent on you? And I'm like, well, I'm hoping not, but I don't know. It kind of sounds like it from the way some people talk. And he's like, God paid for my healing on Calvary. This does not have anything to do with you. And I needed him to say that to me because as humans, we go back and forth. And here's the thing. We had some people who were so set that their pastor was going to be healed. But I knew better because 25 years of pastoring, I've seen a lot of people put themselves in the position where they're so disappointed with God when their answer doesn't come that they lose their faith and walk away. And guess what? I had 3 adult children, one of which is backslid. I was not going to put myself in that position. I was believing for faith, for a healing, but I also knew that God is sovereign. And so I reserved part of that for the just in case. And I didn't box myself into a corner. Now, some of you may disagree with that, and that's why I questioned my husband about it. But I believed and prayed and begged God and did all the stuff people told me to do for a healing. But I still had to say in my heart, this is God's sovereign will. We have to let him do what he's going to do. And so I had to come to a place where I relinquished the past. Now, this does not mean that you give up memories. This means you preserve your memories, but you don't live in the past. You have to let that go. And you know what? The truth is this. Whether it's a happy or a sad thing, you have to let go of what was to appreciate what is. Here's the situation we're finding ourselves in the church right now. We have Pastor and Sister Aaron Soto there. Awesome people. His heart is a heart after my husband's. They're very similar in their belief systems and how they run things. So it's been a very good, easy transfer, but they're still different, right? Now, we had a great 25-year run. We did. Our church did awesome. We had great family feeling, but things will change because now this has to be Pastor Soto's. And so our people have to do this. They need to let go of the past. They can't be thrown up in their face, well, that's not the way Pastor Schmalz did it, or that's not the way Sister Schmalz did it. That's done. We're past there. Now, this needs to be the way that Pastor and Sister Soto will do it. And I'm so happy and thankful they're there. But there has to be a relinquishing of the past. I'm not asking you to do anything that I'm not having to live through myself. And I'm not saying change is easy. Change is really hard. And change can be disappointing, especially if you think you did it all right. And I think we did a lot of stuff right. But there's still going to be different things. Right? One way can be right. There can be 2 rights, right? And so you have to let people, the new ones come in. You have to let go of the past. You have to be ready to change for the future. So the first thing is let go of the questions. Number 2, accept our situation. Number 3, relinquish the past. Number 4, refuse to wallow in self-pity. There's always someone who has suffered more than you. This actually will help you if you remember this. There's always a situation that's more desperate than yours. There's always somebody who's had a rougher turn than you. And does that take away your pain? No. Does it minimize what you're going through? No. But it can help you to not feel consumed by what happened in your life, to wallow in this self-pity. When we suffer a serious loss, it's very natural to feel self-pity, to allow that experience to isolate you from people. And I definitely have fought this. And guess what happens when you're isolated from the group? Then the devil moves in. He likes to get us off and away from the church and away from the crowd of people who are supporting you most, and then he's going to come in for the kill. Don't let yourself be isolated. When you're isolated from others, you also begin to feel indifferent towards their hurts. I definitely had this. I can remember distinctly through the summer, there was a few things that, and mostly the summer's a blur, but a few things popped through my memory that were happening to other people. But I was isolated for obvious reasons. I was caring for my husband, but I was at one function, and somebody was talking to me, just sharing with a group of people how, and please don't think I'm cruel, this is just honestly what happened. They were talking about how their dog died and how broke up they were about it, and I started to laugh. And I'm like, seriously? It's a dog. But for me, where I was indifferent to their hurts. And now that's not fair. I know people love their dogs and animals have a real place in the family. But in my situation, that seemed silly to me. It did. Or they were upset over this thing or that thing, or they went to the store to get this sale item and it was all out, and I'm like, I could barely tolerate that kind of stuff. And, just because what I was going through felt so much bigger, and was. But that didn't make their problems of no effect. So in time, I've had to work through that and not allow myself to stay in that place of self-pity. I do want to share one quick story where the Lord kind of just slapped me upside the head and told me to knock it off. We have a tent revival every year, and my husband was very ill by this time. It was about 3 weeks before he passed. He was extremely weak, but he's such a great guy. He wanted to be fully dressed in a suit, tie and all, had put suspenders on him because his pants wouldn't stay up. So I got him all dressed, and we drove out to the land, our new land, where we had a big tent set up. Well, the ground is plowed every year, and so it's very uneven. There was no way we could get him out of the car and even let him walk on that. It was just too uneven. So they had a parking spot saved for us at the back of the tent, and we rolled the windows down, and Pastor Soto was preaching up there, and people came up to the car and greeted us. But my husband was, by this time, on a continuous IV of morphine to manage his pain. So he was on extremely high doses of painkillers. And so he wasn't really talking much. He was very quiet. Every once in a while, he'd come out with some astounding thing that I was just like, how did he pull that out of his mind? Must be so fuzzy. But we went home after that, and we're sitting at the dinner table, and it was just me and him, and he always wanted to sit even while I would eat, even though he couldn't. And so I'm sitting there, and it's very quiet in the house. Now, our house was always full of activity, but it was very quiet this afternoon. Beautiful sunny day, beautiful afternoon. Everybody's out at the tent, eating chicken, having fun, playing volleyball, and I'm sitting here with my husband who's very ill and just sitting quietly, and I'm eating, and I'm starting to feel sorry for myself. And I'm like, why does this have to be our lot in life? And the more I felt pity for myself, the more my husband, I don't know, I wanted to draw him into a conversation and bring him into it. So I turned to him and I said, well, honey, what are you thinking about right now? And he talked real slow at this time. It'd take him like 30 seconds to process it. And he lifted his head and he said, I'm thinking this is a good place to be. And he put his head back down, and I'm like, here in the house, or where is a good place to be? And he's looked up again, and he said, it's a good place to be a Christian. And I'm like, I'm so terrible, because in all of the pain, here he is dying from cancer. He said, it's a good place to be a Christian. In spite of everything that's happening to me, I'm still glad to be a Christian. And he had so many times that he brought me from my self-pity or took me from a place where I was discouraged and just said, you know, we can do this. God is still in control. So you have to refuse to wallow in your self-pity. Be careful of disillusionment. You know when you're feeling sorry for yourself, how a negative thought can get exaggerated? How many of you have thought that the whole church knew about your problem? Everybody's talking about you, right? Well, I can't tell you how many people came to me through the years and have said, the whole church knows. And I'm like, really? Really? Name them. Well, it's this one, and it's this one, and it's this one, and okay, that's 3. We have 300. Who else? Well, you know, maybe their families. It's still not the whole church. But doesn't that happen to us? Doesn't our mind do that to us? It exaggerates what's happening. And we can do that in our life. We can start to feel like everything's bad in my life. Nothing will ever go right again. Be careful with self-pity because disillusionment comes and despair will take our hope away. And defeat, when we put more faith in our problem than in the promise. It's so important to have a right attitude in dealing with disappointment. 2 Corinthians 4:7-8 says, we are troubled on every side, yet not distressed. We are perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, cast down, but not destroyed. Number 5, go forward. Go forward. After you refuse to wallow in self-pity, we need to move forward. Realize that you have to create a new reality from the shattered pieces of your life. It's not going to be the same life. This was when someone first told me this, I had a really hard time with it. It's not going to be the same life. That life is over. But it still can be a good life. It still can have a good future. Every crisis that happens to us opens door to change the direction of our life for every one of you. Anytime a crisis comes to your home or your life, you have an opportunity to change the direction of your life. Don't squander that. Joseph, he simply could have quit when his coat of many colors was changed in for a rag of a servant, but he chose to continue to do his best. He forged a road that went into a preferred future. Now listen to this. How many of you, when something bad happens, how many of us, now all we know, in our human mind is our past, what we've lived, right? So we've lived our life right up to here. And then something really bad happens. What do? We look back at our past and we're like, what did I do wrong? Well, why is this happening to me? I haven't done anything to deserve this. But guess what? God sees your whole life. He sees that side and that side. And so Joseph, imagine this guy. He lived a good life. Good guy in general. A little braggy, but, we'll forgive that of him. Bragged a little bit about his dreams and all that business. But overall, good guy. And all of a sudden, he finds himself out in Egypt as a slave. Now, Joseph easily could have looked back and been like, what did I do to deserve this? But God was preparing him for something great in his future. There's no way Joseph could have guessed where that road would take him. It's impossible for me to guess or even imagine, not in any way can I imagine where my life will come from here or why this happened. But when you have a problem in your life, don't just look to your past for an answer. We have to look to the future and trust God. So we need to move forward. And then number 6, lastly, reinvest your emotional energy in something else. This is so important, to reinvest our emotional energy. Be involved at the right time in something outside of yourself. The sooner you are able to help others, the better off you will be. This is going to become the art of exchanging your mourning clothes for gladness. And the first time I went back in and taught a Bible study a couple months ago, I didn't really feel ready to even care about someone else's problems. I really didn't. But she asked me to come. She knew what I'd been through. I'd been teaching her study, and we put it on hold through the summer. And I thought, I don't want to do this, but she asked, and I'm gonna make myself do it. I'm just gonna make myself do it. And so I went, and I really enjoyed myself. It felt good to open the scriptures up and teach something again. And I really think there's a healing power in this. When you start to get involved in helping something outside of yourself. And probably you're going to be ready sooner than you think. If you make yourself do it, you know, sometimes the feeling follows the action. Have you ever found that in life? Sometimes you do something and afterwards you're like, that felt good. I didn't think I could do that, but that felt good. So in working through these steps, we move towards restoring our hope in God, hope in our future, hope that things will once again come our way. Hope has an amazing power. Doctors respect it as a powerful medicine. Did you know that? Surgeons are wary of operating on people who have no hope. It's been proven that patients facing surgery have a better chance of healing if they have a positive outlook for tomorrow. Here's a scripture that says that very thing. Proverbs 13:12. Hope deferred maketh the heart sick. But when the desire cometh, it is a tree of life. Romans 4:18. I thought this was an interesting verse. Did you know that in Romans 4:18 it speaks of hoping against hope? Have you ever heard that phrase? Maybe your mom say, I'm hoping against hope that we can do this. What that means is I'm hoping against all odds. In spite of what it looks like or doesn't look like can happen, I'm still hoping that it will work out. We hope that good will come out of our experiences, even if there seems to be no obvious answer. Romans 8:24. For in this hope we are saved, but hope that is seen is no hope at all. Who hopes for what he already has? In other words, if you can't see anything to be hopeful for, guess what? That's exactly when you need hope. When you can't see something to be hopeful for. Hope is the forerunner of expectancy. Expectancy brings excitement. Excitement will reignite life in you. Then you can move from being bitter for what life brings to being thankful. From being paralyzed by your problems to finding solutions and opportunities. From being depressed to realizing life is just too short to be unhappy. From giving up to getting up and trying again. I began with the title, But God is Still Good. This phrase, but God is still good, is one of hope to me. So much so that I had it engraved on a large rock, and it's right by my front door. The story from this, just a week or two before my husband died, we were certain that the time was drawing near. Yet Mike was determined to fight the illness to the end. He never gave in for a moment that the cancer would win. At least to me, he didn't. He did not want to die. He repeatedly told me this, and I've talked to a few other women just to see how people go through it, but he never got to a place where he said, I'm ready to go home. He never said that. He was always like, I want to stay here. There's more work to do. I want to be here with you. And I was starting to get a little nervous about that because I was afraid that he would not have a peaceful passing. And he already suffered so much. I didn't want that. I wanted him to feel good and comfortable about going home to the Lord, which put me in an odd predicament because as much as I didn't want him to pass either, I did not feel like I could say that to him because I felt like it would make him struggle more. And so I was trying to decide how to help him with this. And actually his surgeon, who became our doctor, came to the house, made a house call. Can you believe that? Came to the house and sat on the bed with Mike, and you know, because he had so much morphine, we weren't always sure what he was understanding. And he said, Mike, do you understand that very soon you're going to go home to be with the Lord? And Mike said, yeah. And he said, do you feel like you're ready to go? And he said, no, there's too much work to do. And so then I tried a day or two later, and I sat on the bed, and I was holding his hand, and I was crying, and I said, Mike, I'm so sorry that God chose not to heal you. I'm so sorry about that. And he took his hand out of mine, and he put it on my face, and he said, but Penny, God is still good. And I want you to know tonight that in spite of the fact that God had not healed him and that he passed, he still felt like God was good. We didn't get the answer we asked for. And this is not what we wanted to happen, but God is still good. You can respond to your disappointments and your problems in two ways. You can think that everything is against you, or you can think, you know what? I can't see the end yet, but all things work together for good. If you would stand. It says in Psalms 31 and 24, "Be of good courage. He shall strengthen your heart, all ye that hope in the Lord." I want to invite you right now just to lift your hands. And any unanswered questions you have right now, I want you just to confess them to the Lord. That in spite of your questions, in spite of whatever personal battles you're going through, in spite of the things you don't understand why God does it that way, you're going to trust him. And that, you know what? God is still good. He is still good. And he is working for your good right now. In Jesus' name, we love you, Lord. We thank you, Jesus. Come to you now, Lord. In Jesus' name, in Jesus' name. Thank you, Lord. Hallelujah.